Good evening, I'm Maciej Mikos and you're watching a special edition of World News as the Middle East is edging closer to war. The Israeli military has reported that Iran launched a barrage of ballistic missiles towards Israel, marking a dangerous escalation of the conflict in the region. Sirens sounded in various parts of Israel and people were provided with life-saving guidelines amid the salvo. According to Israeli outlets, some 100 missiles were fired upon the country. They were intercepted in the airspace of Israel's neighbor, Jordan. The move is deemed a response to Israel's killing of Hezbollah leader Hassan Nasrallah and Iran's Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps commander Abbas Nilfurashan last week. Earlier today, Israel entered Lebanon as it announced ground operations aimed at fighting Hezbollah. Fears of an all-out war in the region have gone through the roof amid the latest escalation. United States National Security Advisor Jake Sullivan has condemned today's Iranian missile strike on Israel. He said the U.S. helped coordinate Israel's defense against the attack, adding that no civilian victims have been reported among Israelis.
Today, Iran launched nearly 200 ballistic missiles towards targets in Israel. The United States military coordinated closely with the Israeli Defense Forces to help defend Israel against this attack. U.S. naval destroyers joined Israeli air defense units in firing interceptors to shoot down inbound missiles. President Biden and Vice President Harris monitored the attack and the response from the White House Situation Room, joined in person and remotely by their national security team. We are still working with the IDF and the authorities in Israel to assess the impact of the attack. But at this time, and I stress at this time, we do not know of any deaths in Israel.
Following the recent salvo of missiles fired by Iran towards Israel, the U.S. Department of State spokesman Matthew Miller said Iran will have to bear consequences of the attack.
Of course, Israel has the right to defend itself, as any nation does. In terms of what Israel's response will be, of course, there must be consequences for Iran for this attack. We've made clear that there must be consequences. I'm not going to get into what those consequences are today, but there are things on which we will be coordinating with our Israeli counterparts. And I think in the immediate aftermath of this attack, we are going to coordinate with them on what any response might be.
And to discuss the current developments in the Middle East, we're joined by Patrick Hilsman, columnist for the Turning Point magazine, and Daniel Shadmy, spokesperson for Elnet and expert in diplomacy and foreign affairs. Good evening, gentlemen.
Thanks for having us.
Evening.
Daniel, I'd like to ask you first, have we reached you in Israel?
Yes, I am right now
in Tel
Aviv.
So what's the current situation?
The current situation is that it's been after 1 year of war since Hamas has opened a surprise attack on Israel. We've reached another phase today where we had a second round of attack directly from Iran. They fired over 180 ballistic missiles. It's a historic number. I would add that just prior to that attack, just under my apartment in Tel Aviv, there was a terrorist attack in the tram station where 8 people have been killed and a dozen injured. So it's been quite a tumultuous day, I would say.
Mm-hmm. Right. Apart from the terrorist attack you're talking about, the American officials say there were no casualties among civilian Israelis. Now, does it mean there were some military casualties?
In the terrorist attack, I don't believe so. But what is
in the missile attack? I'm talking about the missile attack.
In the missile attack, there were no casualties because I am very grateful to say that the Israeli air defense system is doing as much as it can to defend and to protect civilians from all origins and genders. So there were no casualties from the historic attack from Iran. If Israel did not have this air defense system, Iron Dome, Arrow 3, and David Sling, we would have seen today the number of casualties that might amount to tens of thousands, if not more.
Right, Daniel, Patrick. Now we already hear from Israeli officials about a possible retaliation. So, what should we expect in coming hours and days?
Well, I just want to issue one correction, though, that there was one casualty that we know of. A Palestinian man who was displaced from Gaza to Jericho was killed by debris falling from one of the intercepted missiles. So there have been no Israeli citizens killed, but there was one Palestinian civilian killed in the attack. In terms of the response from Israel, it's very likely that they're going to target a lot of these Iranian-backed militias throughout the region, potentially against Kitab al-Hezbollah in Iraq, very likely against some of the Houthi militants in Yemen, and very likely that we might even see strikes on Iran itself, which would be a very serious escalation from what we've seen as sort of a Cold War between Israel and Iran for decades.
Right. Now, this Cold War is quite hot. Now, Daniel, this attack, I guess, is not without a connection to the ground operation in Lebanon. Now, could this attack make Tel Aviv reconsider its invasion of Lebanon?
The government of Israel and the IDF have not decided to invade Lebanon. Lebanon is a state that is on Israel's northern border, but it's been taken hostage by a terrorist organization named Hezbollah, in which since the last escalation in 2006 have been building up quite the capabilities on Israel's border with the sole aim of attacking Israel comes the day of the plan, when they decide to execute this plan. So Israel's operations in the northern border target specifically Hezbollah. And I believe the Israeli government and the Israeli IDF have called on Lebanese people to evacuate, and the Lebanese government to beware, and the Lebanese army to evacuate as well. So I don't think that the attack of today will make the IDF reconsider its operation against Hezbollah, which is a proxy of Iran, which is part of the ring of fire Iran is trying to put on Israel's borders. It will actually escalate tensions and show that what Israel is doing is threatening the regime in Tehran.
Mm-hmm. Patrick, Daniel says there's no ground invasion of Lebanon, but the regional leaders, and I'm talking about Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdogan, have a slightly different opinion about the matter. And he pointed to the fact that Gaza was isolated, therefore they couldn't count on any help from the outside. But Lebanon, that's a different story. So, is the situation spinning out of control?
We don't know yet. But that being said, previous military incursions into Lebanon by Israel that have been billed as limited incursions have ended up lasting for years. So even if the target is ostensibly Hezbollah, we've already seen a large number of civilian casualties in southern Lebanon. Throughout the past year of war, of course, Hezbollah has been provoking, but there have also been incidents in which the Israelis have killed Lebanese journalists and in which civilians have been killed in bombings. So I would argue that if they've crossed the border and they're engaged in operations right now, for now it is an invasion. It is a violation of Lebanon's sovereignty. I would also add, though, that a lot of Lebanese people, possibly the majority, also see Hezbollah as a violation of Lebanese sovereignty, because it's very clear that they're acting not out of genuine care for the Palestinians, but as a proxy of Iran. That being said, I think that as soon as Israel crosses the border and you have a large Israeli force in Lebanon, that will change the perspective of people in Lebanon who often oppose Hezbollah, and it might cause there to be a general insurgent reaction throughout the country and throughout anywhere where Israeli forces are met. I think we're treading on extremely dangerous ground here.
Mm-hmm. And if such a scenario happens, who would come to the aid of Lebanon?
Well, Lebanon is a very complicated situation because the Lebanese state is very weak. Generally speaking, it's said that Hezbollah as a force is more powerful than the Lebanese National Army, which in many ways is true. Over the past week, we've seen the myth of Hezbollah's strength weaken significantly. But right now, what you have is a Lebanese state that has spent years in this sort of uncertain balance between Syrian occupation, Israeli occupation, Saudi Arabian influence, Iranian influence. And right now, the central government is probably very desperate for some kind of diplomatic off-ramp. And it would be tragic to see a new occupation of Lebanon and a war break out, especially at a time when Hezbollah faces such criticism in the Arab world. If you'll notice that the reaction to the death of Hassan Nasrallah has been somewhat muted from the Sunni Arab world because he's largely seen as a mercenary for the Assad regime. I can never stand with any kind of military operation that kills civilians, so I think that what's happening in Lebanon is wrong. But that being said, I think that Israel has pulled off a significant coup here and has essentially taken out an enemy very rapidly. And I think that if they were to lose that advantage by having a protracted conflict inside Lebanon, that it will turn into a disaster. And that the significant boost that the government probably has now has the potential to evaporate as soon as the weapons stop being rockets and start being suicide bombs or IEDs that are placed in rocks. The way in which these people can fight changes drastically once the Israeli army is close to where they live.
Right, let's only hope it doesn't come to the worst. Patrick Hilsman, columnist for the Turning Point magazine, and Daniel Shadmy, spokesperson for Elnet, an expert in diplomacy and foreign affairs, were our guests this evening. Thank you so much, gentlemen. That's not the end of our show, though. Today saw the opening of a two-day International Warsaw Security Forum, an international conference devoted to fundamental defense issues for Central and Eastern Europe. On the occasion of the event, TVP World's Mark Steele spoke to Ilan Berman, Senior Vice President of the American Foreign Policy Council in Washington, D.C., who shared his thoughts on Mark Rutte's taking over the helm at NATO and the alliance as a whole against the backdrop of the Ukrainian cause.
Experts from across the world are discussing security issues here at the Warsaw Security Forum. And joined with me now to speak about these challenges and threats when it comes to security is Mr. Ilan Berman, Senior Vice President, American Foreign Policy Council. Hello and welcome.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. It's wonderful to be here.
Well, we have a few challenges and threats coming up when it comes to security. First, perhaps it's not a threat, but we've seen a change in the post of Secretary General. We have Mark Rutte, former Dutch Prime Minister, who is taking over the post of Secretary General. Is it a challenge or a threat? Would you call it that?
I don't think it's a threat. It's certainly a challenging time for him to take over the post. In the run-up to the selection of Secretary General, there was a lot of discussion about who is best positioned. I think he has a big job on his hands. Especially coming from a country like the Netherlands, which are not on the front lines of the conflict with Russia, which are not on the front lines of defending Ukraine, which are not on the front lines of expanding their defense budget. I think he has a very important job to show seriousness, that the alliance has dynamism, that the alliance has momentum, and that he is going to guide the alliance into a period of accelerated activity.
Okay, and well, part of NATO's efforts to secure this part of Europe, to secure the eastern flank, is also by supporting Ukraine. Could we see a continuation of Jens Stoltenberg's policy there?
I think we will, but I think there's a couple of variables, there's a couple of things, of moving parts in the equation. One is obviously the upcoming U.S. presidential election, which is going to potentially very significantly change the way America thinks and interacts with Europe over Ukraine. The second is the climate and the time of the year, because winter is coming. Ukraine has made very clear that they need additional supplies, that they are having problems with infrastructure, with electrification. There is an added urgency to Ukrainian appeals that we hear in European capitals as well as in Europe. As well as in the United States. And so what we're seeing, I think, is a generalized understanding in Europe that the clock is ticking faster, that more creative thought needs to be put into how best to support Ukraine, how best to bolster the effort to deter Russia. This is the time for creative thinking.
Okay, thank you very much for joining us.
My pleasure. Thank you so much.
This was Ilan Berman, Senior Vice President of the American Foreign Policy Council, and we were speaking at the Warsaw Security Forum.
And that would be all for now. Thank you for watching this special edition of World News. And of course, stay with us for much more here on TVP World.